My name is Carl Grondin Sr. I'm the grandfather of Kenneth Carl Grondin III, who was falsely accused of murdering his girlfriend Andrea Elber. So I'm here today just to get our story out, tell our family side of the story of things that we know and things that we don't know. Things we know the police don't know, and possibly what they may know if they'd have done a good investigation. My grandson KC was 19 at the time. He had just turned 19. Andrea was his first girlfriend. He was probably what most people would call overly in love with her, maybe because it was his first girlfriend. And he was looking forward to spending the night with her at her Aunt Stephanie's house, Stephanie and Kip Hummer, who live out on Kings Mill Road, north of Lapeer. He was at home, texting each other back and forth, excitedly looking to meet each other that night. He had only been out there 2 nights before with his best friend, and Andrea had insisted he come by himself this time so they could spend a nice evening alone, so he was very excited about that. But he was at home finishing up his chores, as his mother always made him do. He was washing dishes. Andrea was going to meet him at their house, and they were going to drive out there together. Then Andrea texted him and said she had to change her route for some reason. She would just go right to the Hummer residence, just come and meet her out there. So approximately an hour later, by the time he'd finished his dishes, and then he, perhaps luckily that might have saved his life, finished a video game he was playing, he left, drive to Andrea's to watch movies. Movies that were in his car, that his best friend saw in his car, that he had rented to take out there. When he got there, she wasn't there. It was about a 10 to 15 minute drive to her house, where she was at. When he got there, she wasn't there. So he waited on the porch in his car for approximately 15 minutes. During that time, he texted her and said, "I'm here, babe. Where in the hell are you?" She texted him back a few moments later and said, "Sorry, babe, I can't meet you. Catch you tomorrow." Something had come up, although him and all his friends don't think that text was from her. They think it was from the killer. She never did show up, so he went back home very disappointed, despondent, thinking his girlfriend had for some reason changed her mind, stood him up, went somewhere else, met another person, did something. He didn't know why. Later that night, he went to another friend's house and watched the movies. This friend was also a very good friend of Andrea's. She told him, well, when I broke up with my last boyfriend, I just didn't call him anymore. So he was depressed, thinking maybe that's what happened. For some reason, she changed her whole mind. Not that any of it made any sense when they were going to have the most romantic night of their life, and were excited about it. At any rate, for 2 days, nobody could find Andrea. Then her phone was turned off, and everybody that knew her got more worried because she never turned her phone off and always returned messages, emails, text messages, whatever. She always returned her calls. At some point later, a group of friends, after her dad had called 911, the missing persons, who sent a state trooper from the Flint post out to look for her, a group of friends went to look for her also. My grandson, by the way, was going to college at U of M Flint and working at Kroger's to pay his way through school. This group of friends, 2 different carloads of them, went looking to see if they could find her car somewhere. They thought maybe she just went somewhere else and they would see her car in somebody's driveway or somebody's house or in some subdivision. At any rate, supposedly on the way back home from looking, they couldn't find anything that they thought they were supposed to look off of Rude's Lake Road, which was not where the house was at. But at some reason, they decided to take a shortcut onto Fish Lake Road and go over to 5 Lakes Road. While traveling north on 5 Lakes Road, they found the car. They'd seen a reflection of a light, turned around and went back, and it was Andrea's car. They then went to the party store on Kings Mill Road and called the police. The police came, identified the car as Andrea's. Her dad came, I guess, to verify that it was her car. Her dad looked in the car and immediately said Andrea didn't put this car here because the parking brake was on. These are all things that were testified to in court. My grandson, of course, knew the parking brake didn't work also. They'd been going together for 8 months. He rode in the car many times. Ultimately, the police did find fingerprints in the car, on the steering wheel, on the gear shift, on the parking brake. Fingerprints that did not match my grandson's. There was also some other evidence in the car that we don't know how much the police did or didn't do in trying to check out and track down. At any rate, the kids that found the car went back to my grandson's house to tell him they'd found the car. By this time, it was early in the morning. He had to go to work at 6 o'clock, and the police had told the kids to get out of there. They were taking care of the scene and to go on home. At any rate, that morning about 5:30, the police came to my grandson's house and got him out of bed. And he agreed to go with them downtown. He didn't know, he knew at that time the car had been found because the kids had told him. He didn't know where Andrea was. The police questioned him for 3 hours or so and then took him back home. During the course of that, he agreed to let them search the house, take the clothes he was wearing, and everything else that the police asked him to do. Also at that time, we had found out something had happened in Florida, and I'd called my business lawyer because I didn't know what else to do. The business lawyer spent that whole day on the phone trying to get to the police to tell him he'd been hired by me to represent my grandson. The police refused to let him talk to him. They denied even knowing a lawyer was calling, even though Detective Reese was later caught lying on the stand in the first hearing, saying he didn't know it was a lawyer trying to call him. But in fact, his partner, Detective Ainsley, had turned him in to Prosecutor Conshu, who did nothing about it. Apparently it's okay for policemen to commit perjury. At any rate, because of that, the judge wouldn't allow the statement that he signed to be used, and the judge himself said the treatment by the police was egregious for this neophyte of a young man in regards to police work. At any rate, they then took my grandson, and talking to him at the police station in Lapeer, they told him Andrea's car was found. And then later told him she was dead, which he said, "I don't believe you." Well, they tried to portray it as he didn't show any emotion, he didn't care. Well, they later took him back home, searched the house, took his stuff, and then said they want to take him to Flint for another interview/interrogation, to use what they call the Reed technique, which has been proven many times over, especially on teenagers, to get them to sign false statements that police then use to convict people. Because apparently there are some policemen that don't care. They just want to get a conviction, as do some prosecutors. We know there's a lot of great policemen out there, and we've got some working on the case because we're going to solve the case, even though they didn't care to. They made up their mind to start with, he was her boyfriend, he must have done it. So as things went on, it went on for 4 years, things the jury doesn't know. The reason it went for 4 years is not because they were investigating. They probably didn't investigate more than a week or so, except to go interview different people that we gave them that we suspected or thought maybe had something to do with it. Then they at least went out and talked to them and said, oh, they don't know nothing about it. We still think there's plenty of evidence out there showing there's other people. We know they found DNA on the chair Andrea's body was found in, as well as fingerprints. We know they found fingerprints and DNA on other items in the house that they've never been able to match up with anybody. Except that they know and testified, their own experts, that none of it points to my grandson. It all points to someone else. After their 4.5 hours or so of interrogation in Flint, my grandson finally signed a statement. Even though none of the statement he said was true, the police turned that around and tried to say, well, some of the stuff he said was true. Like he said he went to the house. Well, he always said that. He never denied that. The fact that he said, there, I've signed your statement, now I want to go home. Well, that was true. I guess they call that a true statement. And when the police do these statements, it seems in some police departments, it's normal practice to claim that the audio portion of the interrogation somehow malfunctioned, either ran out of batteries, quit working, or whatever. So they have another 8 or 10 minutes where you're watching on film what someone's doing, but you can't hear what they're saying. So during this time, you don't hear my grandson say, there, I wrote everything you told me to, even though none of it's true. The police claim that during this time where nobody could hear anything, they asked him what he did with the gloves. That question was actually never asked. Nothing to do with gloves, but apparently they asked him that because they couldn't find his fingerprints or whatever reason they had. But the police claim that he said, I burned them. So for that reason, they later followed up and had a forensic guy scrape up a burn pile that was out at the scene where they found the car. But that question was never asked. They also asked my grandson, well, what did you do with the stuff you said you moved? Which is part of the statement that they told him to write down. They claim he said, you find out, you're the cops, but it's not in the barn. That question also was never asked. That's things that we believe Detective Reeves makes up because he's aggravated he couldn't get anything out of it. The main reason they took him to Flint was Detective Dwyer, who's supposedly the resident expert in this Reed technique of getting stuff out of people, had given up after 3 hours and told Detective Reeves, I can't get anything out of him, he ain't going to admit anything, because he continually denied forever he knew nothing about it. They tried to plant the scenario that Andrea killed herself. He said, absolutely not. She was a happy person. She would never do that to herself. But they convinced him to say in a statement, well, maybe she killed herself, and that's why I moved the stuff around so her parents wouldn't think she did that to herself. At any rate, it went on for 4 years because the prosecutor, who got promoted to judge for his efforts, and the new prosecutor refused to hear the case. And so he turned it over to the state attorney general, who assigned a prosecutor from Detroit. Obviously, all they want to do is prove their case somehow or another and get a conviction. They didn't care whether he was innocent or whether that no evidence pointed toward him. As far as the police are concerned, they finished their job. They did a great job. They got a compliment from the attorney general, so everybody's happy, except our family. We will fight forever. We know he's innocent. I'm doing everything I can. We've got 5 private detectives on the case. We're going to solve the case, even though the police aren't interested, because we know that's the ultimate exoneration. Other than that, we'll go through the normal appeals process, praying that we can keep the time at a minimum. A young man's life's been shattered, facing life in prison for something he didn't do. He was guilty of having a girlfriend, guilty of cooperating with the police, like unfortunately many young people are. And for those people out there who want to disparage our family or anybody else about it, why do they think there's so many people, hundreds and hundreds, that have been released from prison when DNA proves they're innocent? And many of them are young teenagers that sociologists, psychologists, and everybody else has proven that are more susceptible to police interrogation tactics to get them to say things that aren't true just so they can use them to prosecute somebody. We're just going to keep working on this. We've got the support of hundreds and hundreds of people. We believe in our heart that the judge knows he's innocent. We know everybody in the court system anywhere around Lapeer County that knew anything about it knows he's innocent, and that he was railroaded by basically 3 policemen and a prosecutor, and a jury that somehow heard what the prosecutor told them. They assume police don't lie. They assume the prosecutor's telling the truth. They assume no matter what the judge tells them, this person must be guilty of something or he wouldn't be sitting in a defendant's chair. And so that's how they came to their verdict. Even though we know a couple of them have questions, one of them came forward, told the newspaper that he was pressured into it because they'd been in court for 3 weeks and they were tired of it and wanted to go home. And apparently it didn't mean that much to him that a young man's life was getting shattered, facing life in prison. But we forgive them and we pray for them. We know they were just citizens trying to do their job. We know there's a lot of great state policemen out there, and there's a lot of great county police that we appreciate all they've done. And we will solve the case. We will get a new trial. We know Judge Holowka knows the truth, and we got faith that he will do the right thing and help us all he can. Thank you. I'd just like to finish by saying we do have a website, www.justiceforkc.com. We ask you to go on that website, read our side of the story, see the facts that are the facts in the case, not what you hear people saying who pretend they're there. We ask you to look at that website, sign our petition, write letters to the judge, write letters to the governor, write letters to the attorney general. Tell them we want justice in this case, as we do for all people. In our website, we've promised people that anyone that would help us with is probably a $500,000 thing. And contrary to popular belief, we're not rich. We're just a fortunate family that's been able to stay in business for 40 years and pay our bills. But there are many people coming forward to help us. And we promise that anybody that does help us, once this case is solved and Casey's out, any money that's left will be donated to the Innocence Project at Western Michigan University. There are many of these projects around the country. I encourage everybody to look at these websites and see what they're doing and see how many people they've gotten out of prison that were wrongly accused. Unfortunately, many times it takes 3 to 5 years, if not 10, 15 years before people get out. But we know we can do this if we all work together, we all pray. We appreciate all the prayers everybody's given us and our family, because we know that in spite of this, we're blessed with all the things God gives us. We just thank you for your help.